This morning, we're going to give you the latest on COVID-19, how the virus is affecting immigrants, including an interview with Myra Lamancia, office manager and senior paralegal at William H. Caramel in Newark, where I live, regarding the presidential's latest comments on immigration, cancellation of Pride, and the most well-fed thieves ever caught. Of course, the most dramatic premature ejection you've ever seen. But as usual, we're going to throw it over to Amanda.
You, Phil? No, that's too personal. Anyway,
we're going to throw it over to Amanda.
With the newscast. I mean, Amanda. My God.
It's starting great. Amanda, what do you got for us?
All right. In U.S. news, President Trump has made it clear that he wants the economy to start up again and has even supported protesters who are urging some states to ease restrictions. But he said Wednesday evening that he thought Governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, has taken it too far by allowing barbershops, nail salons, and other businesses to open Friday, with others slated to open Monday. President Trump said, quote, "I love these people that do all of these things, the spas, the beauty parlors, barbershops, tattoo parlors. I love them, but they can't wait a little. They could wait a little longer, just a little bit. Not much, because safety has to predominate." In local news, 2 cats in New York have become the first pets in the United States to test positive for COVID-19, the CDC announced Wednesday. The CDC said both cats live in 2 different parts of the state and have mild respiratory symptoms. They're expected to make a full recovery. Also in local and animal news, 7 more big cats have tested positive for coronavirus at the Bronx Zoo, according to NBC News. Officials say 4 more tigers and 3 African lions tested positive for COVID-19, according to the Wildlife Conservation Society, which runs the zoo. These 7 are in addition to the ones that were found a few weeks back. The Bronx Zoo said, quote, "Since the initial test earlier this month, the cats have recovered and are behaving and eating normally. Their coughing has also reduced greatly." In New Jersey news, according to NJ.com, the coronavirus death toll in New Jersey increased Wednesday to 5,063 residents, with 95,865 total cases statewide. As officials announced another 314 deaths and 3,551 positive tests, even as they continue to rise, there are hopeful signs of the outbreak stabilizing. The latest update includes 2,050 deaths at New York's long-term care facilities. The facilities account for 11,608 of the state's total positive tests. Murphy said, quote, "Still, the effort to slow the rate of increase in cases, often referred to as flattening the curve, appears to be working." Back to you guys.
So some other headlines involving, thanks, Amanda, involving the coronavirus. Just got straight in, just completely ignoring people. I'm so sorry. We're nearing 900,000 cases, almost 47,000 deaths. Price of oil is down to $15 per barrel, and next month it could fundamentally worth the prices falling to negative 100 per barrel, according to energy strategists. This makes sense as most planes are grounded, people are staying at home, and of course, oil. The problem with oil is that it's difficult to handle. It can't be really easily stored because, it's oil. You can't just put it in your basement, which is funny because I think it was West Texas oil dropped at one point to negative $40 a barrel, and my friends and I were joking, just give us $40, we'll take a barrel and keep it in our basement. Give us 10 barrels, we'll take $40.
Let it age like a fine vintage.
So I meant to ask you guys, what's the weather by you? Because by me, it's 43 degrees. It's going to be a high of 51, humidity 47, and chance of rain 50%.
Yeah, here in Newark, it's around about the same. We got 41 right now, high of 51, low of 44. Wait, how's it 41, but the low's 44? Oh my God. But yeah,
we've hit a glitch in the matrix today. We're on a day that doesn't exist.
A low that's not supposed to exist.
April 22nd or
Thursday, April 22nd, that does not exist.
But
I threw it to the wrong person for the news. It's just like,
it's raining right now, and then it's going to be cloudy for most of the day, and then it's going to rain again tonight. What about you over there in Cedar Grove, Tara? How are you doing with your weather?
In Happy Valley, it's 40 degrees. Feels like 38. UV is like 1 because the clouds it's really cloudy.
UV is
a little bit of wind. It is. It's like 1 out of 10 on the UV thing. Chance of rain 50%. It's been doing something on and off. Like, it's just like kind of like
it is what it is. Basically.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit of a gross day. I blame that for a little bit of us being off on to get things moving. But we're doing good. We're here. We're functioning. Yeah. We hope all of you at home watching this on the YouTubes or listening on the WMSC are doing well.
I hope you're not getting too stir crazy. I watch BuzzFeed Unsolved, and let me tell you, Ryan Bergara and Shane Madej, when they do their Q&As, they're absolutely unhinged. They're like losing their minds, whether it's for the camera or genuine. And I don't know, but it is hysterical to watch just them lose it. So we're here. We're keeping it together. We know we don't got our eggs scrambled. We got our eggs still in the fridge inside the carton.
Still in the fridge, and they're keeping, which is important. But let's bring it together a little bit. We have a couple stories about COVID-19. Not so much the virus itself, but things that are happening around it, which are equally as important, because this is stuff you guys really need to know. This is important. These are decisions that are going to be affecting you and everybody else going forward. So we wanted to bring you guys a couple stories about this and information that we think is relevant to you. And we hope you guys, take it to heart and then do some digging of your own, because there's some really kind of scary things happening right now surrounding what's happening around the virus. For example, our first story today, a health department outsider says doubts over hydrochloroquine has led to him getting ousted. The official who led the federal agency involved in developing a coronavirus vaccine said yesterday that he was removed from his post after he pressed for more vetting of that hydrochloroquine, which is in reality an anti-malaria drug embraced by President Trump as a coronavirus treatment, and that the administration had put politics and cronyism ahead of science, quote.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with that. Obviously, we don't know the full effects of this because there still hasn't been a peer-reviewed study on the effects of hydrochloroquine, however it's pronounced.
Hydro.
Yeah, this anti-malaria drug. There hasn't been enough peer-reviewed studies going into it because you haven't had the time to do a peer-reviewed study. Line swine. Okay. Annabella over here doing phonetics for us. It's fantastic what our general manager can do. So chloroquine, pronounced like swine, but we don't know what it can actually do because we're hearing different things happening. Some people it doesn't really do much for them. Other people it helps out their symptoms, and other people actually get negative effects from them. So because of how new this virus is and how new the treatment is, it's going to take a very long time for us to actually get how it affects. By the time we're able to handle coronavirus, that's when we're going to find out just how good hydrochloroquine actually worked.
Right. Weird. The thing that's
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. You're good.
No, I was just gonna say.
I feel like we're about to say the same thing.
I feel like maybe, I don't know. I'll say it first, so then you let me know.
All right, let's see.
But what's weird about the drug is that I feel like it's a lot of the same thing that we know about this virus. Like a lot of times, some people will get the virus worse than others, and then and they don't know why they got it, or some people are more asymptomatic. But then with the drug, some people it helps, but some people it doesn't. It's very on and off, when you have a headache, you could usually take Advil and it goes away, you know what I mean? It's known that's going to go away. But with this, you just don't know. And I feel like I don't know.
Right. And I was wrong. We were going to say different things, which is cool. The thing that's more troubling to me is that this guy, Rick Bright, was dismissed as the director of the Department of Health and Human Services Biomedical Advanced Research Department, and put on a much narrower job, according to him, because he disagreed with this. In a scorching statement that Dr. Rick Bright, who received a PhD in immunology and molecular pathogenesis from Emory, said, quote, "I believe this transfer was in response to my insistence that the government invest billions of dollars allocated by Congress to address COVID-19 pandemic in safe and scientifically vetted solutions and not in drugs, vaccines, and other technologies that lack scientific merit. I am speaking out because to combat this deadly virus, science, not politics or cronyism, has led the way," unquote. This is from the article the New York Times ran on this, which has his quote in it. That to me is more concerning because that's scary to me, is that because he didn't share, if this went down exactly the way he's saying it did, because he didn't share opinions that benefited the current powers that be and the investments that they have, he was removed from his position, which is really, really scary, because that's incredibly that's dangerous. Why would you not want the smartest, most competent person spearheading this campaign of science that is literally going to save people's lives? Like,
it's also sadly unsurprising. This has been a running theme with this administration. A lot of people who have spoken out or had different opinions have been removed or have been encouraged to resign, and just a lot of partisanship is playing into it. Like, Mitch McConnell was talking yesterday about not willing to allocate more funds for states that happen to be harder hit, like New York and New Jersey and other blue states like California. And basically, instead of saying, "Oh, we'll give you funds," like, "Oh, we can pass a law that allowed you to restructure and declare bankruptcy," as opposed to actually paying money to help us out because of their relationship with the Republican Party. And it very much is how things have been operating. It's a lot of partisanship, and it's already bad enough we have partisanship when it comes to voting for laws, when it comes to trying to pass resolutions. Not saying that Democrats are also not uh, complicit in that. Democratic partisanship can also hurt us, but just right now is this is the worst moment to be able to stay in the across the aisles. Like, you need to come together and you need to get things working. And if whoever's in power isn't able to sit there and say, okay, this person may disagree with me and may have different ideas, but let me keep them here, and then we can work together to figure out, all right, is my idea better? Is your idea better? Or are we going to meet halfway to find a solution that we can both agree on, as opposed to just, ousting them because you want to do it your way.
Agreed, 100%. And I think the other important thing to remember is, for people on whatever side of the aisle you identify yourself as, is that even if we're inside, November's coming. Okay, there's going to be a lot of elections coming up, including, obviously, the presidency, but like all the elections that go along with that. Mail-in votes are a thing, people. Like, this is not just because we might physically not be able to get to the polling place. Like, that's not, we can't let that stop us, because these are the people that make these decisions.
And
our elected representatives are, these are the people that end up putting this kind of pressure on doctors and, how we handle situations like this pandemic. So please, like, do not forget that. My God.
And the disconcerting thing too is some of the reactions to mail-in votes that some people have because of when voting for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, for example, was happening. The U.S. Supreme Court voted by mail, off location, to not allow Wisconsin citizens and other citizens to vote by mail, which is a lot of hypocrisy.
See, the ridiculous thing about the mailing, like people getting mad about, like, oh, the mailing and vote thing could like cause problems and stuff. Like, it's ridiculous because you could literally show up to a polling place and people could still like cheat and still get different votes in. Like, it can happen anyway. You do it online,
and you can get turned
do
away.
it in mail. And exactly. And I think it's ridiculous that like it's even a topic that could happen, because it could happen anyway.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like talking in more conservative areas that, like, oh, if we allow this mailing vote, a lot more people would vote and we might lose power. And I'm just like, so you're actively admitting to voter suppression. That's what's happening, because you can see that,
right. If what you literally just said was, if certain people, meaning all people, are allowed to vote, we will lose power.
Which, like, at the end of the day, like, whether or not you're Republican, Democratic, centrist, Tea Party, left wing, right wing, unaligned, everyone deserves a right to vote, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Like even people who have gotten out of prison deserve to vote. I mean, if you were allowed, all these people, like Florida is a big one. A lot of people can't vote because their right to vote has been taken away because they went to jail, and then they have to go before a panel led by the Florida governor and some chosen officials that basically choose whether or not you want to vote on a whim. Like one of the questions one of the people ask is, do you go to church? What does that have to do with your ability to vote and function in human society?
Yeah, like, I guess the whole thing is, like, we did fight for, most of us fought for our right to vote, in a sense, and whatever we, like, women weren't always allowed to vote. So, like, I feel like at the end of the day, even if you don't like either candidate, you gotta vote just to know, like, this goes, like, I'm not a fan of politics at all, but like, I'm still gonna show up at the polling place to like vote. because like that's important, and I don't like, you know what I mean? Like you just got to give that vote in because people fought for that for you, and just do it. So,
and
yeah.
there's been years and years of people not being able to vote.
Yeah,
exactly. And also when this is an interesting case because now we get to see how important an elected, I feel like to some people it's become a little bit detached how important an elected official is, because through previous eras we've had things that don't directly affect us, like issues around the world, like things that happened during the Obama administration, even some things during the Bush administration. Like, yeah, there was the economy and the bailout things that directly affected us, but there weren't too many, like there wasn't like a public health crisis like this where literally the administration's direct response has an effect on people's lives.
because like I mean, like we had other health problems, like we had like Ebola, we had swine flu, we had all these other things, and they were big things. But did the whole country shut down because of them? No. Like I feel like I heard about them for like a week or two, and then it was like gone. Like you didn't hear about it again. And it's like maybe that was just because I was young and I didn't know. But still, at the same time, I think I would have remembered if things got shut down, and things didn't get shut down. So
we didn't get daily coverage of swine flu to the extent that we have now.
Colleges didn't get shut down.
Exactly. I think this is a good way to segue into our next story too, because it's definitely connected to how not just the administration but different special interest groups and private parties are involved in. But Annabella had brought up to us a story of a podcast that talks about and looks into what's going on now with these protests that are going on in places like Florida, Michigan, different parts of the country that we're seeing protests, people who want to open up the country. And really what it boils down to some very disconcerting things. There are Facebook posts and Facebook groups that are formed, and we see similar language. We see, that show that there's identical people behind the scenes. We have conservative donors and, many tentacles, so to speak, from Washington pushing for the protests, like someone like Stephen Moore, who's a conservative activist who's in the committee to open the economy.
We can play you a little bit of this podcast, which is from the New York Times. Let's hear a clip from it where you could hear from this conservative quote unquote activist talking to a very small viewership YouTube channel on how some of this behind the scenes organizing is happening, and while it's nowhere near as grassroots as it sounds like. Let's take a listen.
Outside. If we don't open the economy by May 1st, we are in really, really deep trouble.
And he says,
we saw more protests today. I'm working with a group in Wisconsin that wants to do a drive-in.
I'm working with a group to organize a protest in Wisconsin.
This is great. We have one big donor in Wisconsin. I'm not going to mention his name. And I told him about this. He said, Steve, I promise I will pay the bail and legal fees for anyone who gets arrested.
And I've even got a donor lined up who's ready to pay the legal fees of anyone who gets arrested.
So this is a great time, gentlemen and ladies, for civil disobedience. We need to be the Rosa Parks here and protest against these government injustices.
I've asked these are the modern day Rosa Parks fighting for freedom and liberty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Everybody here, let's.
All right.
Modern day Rosa Parks. I'm not even touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
No, I mean, I think we should a little bit. Like that's from the award-winning New York Times podcast, The Daily, and which you just heard was Stephen Moore Parks, talking to a very small subscriber about. I think that video that originated
300
from like 300 hits. Yeah,
that's according to the podcast. Something that is a very important word that we need to know now and research is astroturfing. So for the very, very, very simple word, astroturf is a kind of like synthetic turf that people use on fields and everything. It's not very fun to play on.
Fake grass.
It burns you a lot if you play sports like soccer. Astroturfing, like Tara said, is fake grassroots. We have companies who are able to use basically shadow money because there are laws that allow groups to invest money with complete anonymity. They'll funnel money into a front, basically the equivalent of a mafia front. they funnel money into that, and then that gives money to different causes, and they'll hire actors. And this is part of what's happening. There's some on the subreddit our Maryland, for the state of Maryland. Someone did a little bit of research into the founding of these groups, where they found the Pennsylvanians against excessive quarantine and Minnesotans against excessive quarantine were connected to the Pennsylvania Firearms Association and another group called the Minnesota Gun Rights, which both have the same layout, both have the same domains registered with the same registrar and registered on the same exact date at the same exact time.
Right.
Like,
some more that's alarming. And what's also interesting is that this is more information from the podcast. Among those fighting our aforementioned Rosa Parkses are people from Freedom Works and Tea Party Patriots, who, if you remember, a couple years back were part of the Tea Party movement in the United States of kind of reestablishing far-right conservatism. Also involved as a law firm led by former Trump White House officials. There's networks of conservative groups and an ad hoc coalition of conservative leaders known as Save Our Country. There is the White House, even though the White House keeps denying any involvement with these things.
The group in Michigan was helped by a political group that has direct ties and has historically been heavily funded by family of Secretary of State Betsy DeVos, although her family has denied direct involvement in the protests. It's less than it's less than disconcerting at this point. Like, it's very interesting that you have these right organizations constantly pushing conspiracies about, like, this is just the left trying to get control of the country and stuff like that, and then you have this come out on that side, and it's just like and it's
also a little bit misleading too, because there is data. We pulled some of this from NBC showing that a majority of Americans are more concerned about reopening too quickly than they are about the fabled damage to the economy. And also that President Trump's handling of the situation so far, which involves a lot of this, astroturfing and supporting pseudoscientific things that aren't, vetted or guaranteed safe, he still has a higher disapproval rating than approval rating in the United States by a factor of about 10%.
It's very interesting that they always say they want to.
It's not the view of the people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they want to save the economy, but the economy can be propped up by government help. For example, the amount of money that was pumped into the stock market recently, where it just kind of feels like it's not the economy that needs to be saved, but capitalistic endeavors that need to be saved.
I mean, because at the end of the day, when you look at people, you can go back to work and you could do whatever you want, but if this virus isn't killed, or we don't have a vaccine, or whatever the case may be, you're just going to end up getting sick and you're going to be out another 2 weeks, or you could possibly die from it.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you going to risk that? I mean, I don't understand, because you go back to work, you could die, and then the economy's suffering because your company just lost you as an employee.
Exactly.
When you look at it
I think that's kind of one of the important. You're 100% right, Amanda. And I think that's one of the important takeaways of this, is that a lot of these things are not motivated by people that actually care about the economy or public safety or people or this country at all. These are if you hear this term gets overused a lot, fine, but these are special interest groups. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
These are groups that are turning a profit off of this. And I almost, by the way, since that Rosa Parks, Stephen Moore said that, I almost in the back of my head want to be like, when he made that comment about people like, oh, he has his anonymous investor lined up to bail anybody out, pay the legal fees of anybody who gets arrested. Back of my head, I want to be like, try it.
There's a good chance,
see if it works. See if his anonymous investor comes through.
You'll see that. You'll see the thing there. I know it's always, people harp on it all the time, but you have to be careful not to repeat history. The Spanish flu, if you inform yourself and you look up history about the Spanish flu, we are literally on the same path. It started off small in the beginning, in comparison to what it turned into. Federal government didn't step in right away. You had some states that were, states and cities that were pretty hard on lockdown. St. Louis was one of the examples in the Spanish flu that pretty much locked everything down right off the get-go, and then you had other states that were just kind of like, it's whatever, it'll be fine. Obviously World War I was going on at the time, so that definitely contributed to it. But when World War I ended, in the midst of quarantine, they decided to have parades throughout the country, and then the Spanish flu exploded. Like,
I mean, that's exactly how I would think. Like now, like, I mean, we have these states that are really taking it seriously. New Jersey is one of them, as well as New York, and like these pacts that governors are making with each other. Like, it's good. That's great. Like, because I don't feel like I'm going to be able to go out and do something again until it's pretty safe. And like, you know what? That's fine. I mean, as much as I want to go out and I want to go do something, I'd rather be safe and have my life at at the same respect.
100%.
So like, I'm gonna be happy to listen to Murphy and listen to Cuomo and all these other governors that are actually doing something about this. And my only fear is with these other states that are like trying to lift these restrictions, and like, which is gonna turn into what you're talking about, Philippe, with the Spanish flu, is that these other states are trying to open, and basically once we're gonna be like, one day we will be recovered, we will make it through this. But at the same respect, if we get done and the state starts to open up, like our state in New York, the people down south or wherever are going to start bringing that back up here, if that makes sense, because they're going to travel. They're going to travel again.
Yeah.
Because their state's open. So they're going to come back to New York and New Jersey and all these other places, California, and it's just going to affect us, the people that actually did it right. And then we're going to be in this mess again.
It's funny too. It's funny too, because Florida was very adamant when New Jersey was turning into a hot spot. If you're coming from New Jersey or New York, don't come here. And if you do, we're going to force you to get into the quarantine. And I'm like, I think at this point, we need to give them their just desserts. You want to come to New Jersey? You want to come to New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, any state up here in the Northeast or, the West? Like, don't.
Yeah,
we don't want you here.
I mean, you were right in the middle of that, right, Philippe? Weren't you like down there like when this was all starting?
My girlfriend was. She was in Miami, and she left early. Left most of her stuff in her apartment because the lease wasn't up yet, so she just left. A, because of how bad it's getting down there, and B, because she was worried about her parents, who are essential workers, who are running the risk every single day, and she has to go back down now at some point with a moving truck to pick up all her stuff. But she was saying, like, it's ridiculous how many people are still going out. Like, the most interaction she had aside from her roommate were other people in her in the building and the property where she lived, because obviously those people are smart enough to stay at home, but they still interacted with everyone else in the building, because at the very least, if you're in the same building, something's going to happen that's going to pass through it. But they still practice social distancing because she lives with people that aren't crazy and don't think that this is all a conspiracy. Like, we're going to get hit with a second wave. The CDC is already saying that they fear that a second wave is very possible and will be pretty miserable. Like, we're not doing this because there's some world powers trying to like a secret government trying to take control of the world, like places like QAnon on Reddit want to think, and 4chan. Like, this is an issue. People are dying, people are getting sick, my friend's dad has coronavirus and he had pneumonia, and after that they thought he had pneumonia again. It turned out to be coronavirus. He thankfully didn't have to go on an incubator or a breathing tube. He just had a mask. Ventilator. He had a mask, and they put him in a little nose thing that you usually get when you go to the hospital anyway.
Nasal cannula.
So, and saying like, he's still struggling and he's still having difficulties, but he's much better, and he's already approved for the antibody treatment with plasma.
Right. And like, what kind of keeps knocking around in my head as this happens is something. Like, I don't want to harp on this too long, but I do think this needs to be said. Like, as someone who's diabetic, whose mother and father are diabetic, like, watching people spit in the face of public safety like this, and not just me, like literally anybody with a compromised immune system, like people who are diabetic, people who have undergone chemotherapy, surviving cancer patients. Like, it's just like, like, this is making the world a scarier and less safe place for me and people I care about and people I'm related to work in. Like, why? What are you hoping to gain from this?
No, I mean, we heard all those stories of grocery store workers getting like spit at because they're like not getting what they want, and like people aren't social distancing in the store. It's like, just social distance, get what you need, get out, and go home. Like, no one wants to deal with your annoyingness and sad.
The flip flop. I think just to put, not to put a pin in this, but to really just exemplify how crazy this is. The flip flop on talking points and rhetoric that these people use. You've seen signs that say, "My body, my choice," referring to masks and referring to going things. Annabella put it up right here for us. Like the mental dissonance for these people who tend to lean pro-life, which is in itself a statement that is a little misleading, because they're pro-life as long as you're inside the womb. Why? That's really all I can say.
Right. Like, you were protesting against people who said "my body, my choice."
Like,
and now
suddenly,
you want to hijack that catchphrase. Like,
I get it. Just boggles the mind.
Like, stay safe, people. Stay safe and stay informed. And I guarantee you, if you've had any inclinings to join a movement like that, you're better than this. You're smarter than this, and you know it.
Honestly, at this point, just join a movement to, I don't know. I feel like people who would be protesting to get Joe Exotic out of jail at this point would be on a better moral ground than people protesting to open up all of this stuff. Like, that's how crazy it is. Let's jump into this weird, very weird story coming out of China. Of there were 2 Chinese doctors that were infected with coronavirus during Wuhan, and they were put on life support. And while one of the treatments they were receiving, their skin started turning dark. Like, it looks like they were inside a sauna. Not a sauna, a tanning bed for way too long.
And they set it to, like,
they were transferred twice in the hospital. And it is believed, according to Chinese state media, that there was a hormonal imbalance after their livers were damaged by the bug. Now, we know liver problems induce jaundice, which is just yellowing of the skin.
This is super jaundice.
you mentioned that a few times now.
Super jaundice. It's got a cape.
Like,
okay.
It's crazy because we know how the body reacts in very interesting ways to damage, stuff like that. I mean, people can get physically hurt from stress, just regular emotional, mental stress. You can start losing weight and stuff like that. This is crazy. The fact that they turned dark brown, from just how damaging the coronavirus is. To the liver.
I had jaundice as a baby. Now that I think about
my grandfather, after he did his
lemon flavored Tara, was turning all sorts of colors.
I think he still has a little bit of jaundice after doing his it wasn't chemo, but he was doing some sort of radiation therapy for his prostate cancer. My grandfather, which prostate cancer is one of the easiest to treat unless it's like in like the later advanced stages. So he's fine, but he's still a little bit yellow from that. But like, these Chinese doctors were straight up brown.
Yeah.
It's insane, and not just from treatment, but from the actual damage of the coronavirus. We already knew the coronavirus did damage to people's lungs, because that's kind of what it does. It attacks the lung cells in a similar way to the pneumonia does too. Most respiratory diseases in some way damage your lungs, and coronavirus is no different. But like, this is a whole other level. Like, what can you say to that, aside from don't get corona if you don't want to end up like this. You're going to get lack oxygen, and your organs are going to start getting damaged.
Right. Don't try to turn into Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Don't be the next Rosa Parks. That guy said that could compare to like any of these idiots, or compare to somebody as important as Rosa Parks. Is just like, oh, we could spend time on that, but we won't.
We're going to jump to this other story. So Trump tweeted a few days ago talking about around midnight of all times about limiting immigration out of the country. And obviously people were reacting pretty strongly to it, of course. But, once the details came out, we understood the full ordeal of it. And the ban itself is not as extensive as we first thought. So I think for this story, we're going to bring in someone who can probably give us a lot more information on not just the ban, but the current situation with immigration in the United States. Myra Lamantia.
Do it.
Yeah, Lyra Lamantia, who I pronounced her name wrong. I apologize when we first started the show. But she is the office manager and senior paralegal at William H. Carmel in Newark, New Jersey, MSU class of 2012, and MBA student here at the Feliciano School of Business. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, guys. Good morning.
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 How are you?
So good.
Right,
how are you
going?
today?
Good. I'm actually up early.
Welcome to the club.
So we have this story where it was very much obviously when it first was presented to us in classic President Trump fashion, just a quick tweet, no, not much details, ended up being misrepresented. Like anyone else, what was your first reaction when you saw the tweet? Even just personally, when you read that, like what are the thoughts running through your head? What are the thoughts running through your team's head now that you kind of have to, this is your job? Like what was going on?
Well, initially our thought process is just like well, for me, it's like, how do you stop immigration? How do you just say, okay, immigration stopped? Like, what does that mean? You know, is it green cards? Is it work permits? Is it employment based? Is it family based? Is it like, there's just so many aspects, and immigration is so diverse that when you say immigration is stopped, your heart sinks. You know, it's enough that there's so many families out there that, you know, can't collect unemployment, can't collect certain things, and you're just going to say, hey, we're just stopping immigration. There's still people in the process to try to get their green card, so you know, they're freaking out as to if they're going to get their green card, not get their green card, or what's going to happen to their family members, to their children, their mother. There's just a lot involved in it that I think when he tweets things like that, it's not fair to, I guess, to me as an immigrant and as an American to just have those emotions when we're going through this pandemic, and then on top of that you just throw this out of left field, and you're like, well, how does that help what we're going through? You're just making my anxiety worse.
Right. So one of the things that we were curious about was what happens to, you know, for people who are in the process right now who are not concretely on one side or the other of being an immigrant. What happens to, you know, the thousands of people who are in the bottleneck sort of in transit part, like working on the process of immigration, kind of like that limbo? What happens to them now?
Okay, so basically the what he issued, his executive order, just affects people that are outside of the United States. So everybody that's already here that is applying for green cards, they're fine. They're going to get their green card. If they're applying for work permits, they're going to get their work permits. So essentially, who it affects are like children and spouses of like legal permanent residents, or US citizens who have adult children or have parents, siblings that are outside of the country who are trying to immigrate into the United States. I actually have the order here with me. So he has like scopes, and like a section 2, it's like his scope of suspension and like who he's allowing in and who he's not. So one of the interesting things in his section 2 was that one of the limitations is that any alien seeking to enter the United States on an immigrant visa as a physician, nurse, or other healthcare professional to perform medical research or other research intended to combat the spread of COVID, or to perform work essential to combating, recovering from, or otherwise alleviating the effects of COVID, are exempt from his order. So to me, I think he just did it as a, hey guys, kind of like to scare everybody a little bit, but there's a lot of people that are exempt from it. So it affects a small percentage of the immigrants at this point. But like you guys said, the way that he tweeted it and the way that it's being portrayed is very catastrophic, that it's not essentially necessary at this point. And then what's interesting with that is that for him, it was, hey, I want to boost up the economy. You know, I want to save American jobs. And at this point, I don't really know what jobs he is saving. I mean, we're all kind of living the situation. I mean, at this point, our office is kind of running, but we're still, some of us are unemployed. Some of us, are collecting unemployment. So I'm not really sure what jobs he's trying to save at this point.
It very much reads as his usual a play just really to reach out to his base and kind of reinforce that he's with them. But for people who are, you know, people like your clients and people you work with, even people you may know personally, I know, you know, I live in Newark. I've worked in Newark. I've heard stories about my family dealing with immigration even before 9/11, and when those restrictions came out. What is the reaction of people? Because I remember whenever he pulls up any sort of limitation on the Dream Act, when he pulled up, you know, just widespread attempts at bans and attempts at keeping green card approvals down. What is the reaction like? Do you get an influx of calls? Do you get more and more people reaching out saying like, hey, am I okay right now? Am I going to be able to be safe? Like, do your phones just get, you know, completely blown up by people scared because they don't know what's going on, and Trump is always so vague with the way he says things?
Yeah, a lot of people do get scared. We do get extra phone calls. And then what's unfortunate to it is that a lot of our clients are Central American, South American. So there is a sort of a language barrier. So sometimes even just explaining this to them is difficult. And I think what's hard about it too is the uncertainty that comes with it. You know, you mentioned DACA, and I was actually reading that yesterday where the DACA can continue to renew their status. But what's happening now is that they were told that ICE, Customs and Enforcement, which is the people who deport you, weren't going to have their information. Where yesterday I read an article that it said that now they do have these students' information. So like, what does that mean? You know, and then as these students, you could say, or professionals that are on DACA, do they now run the risk of ICE just coming, picking them up and deporting them because now they know where they live? So why, you know, they're scared now that they applied for this benefit, it can be taken away. And at the same time, they're going to get sent to a country that they possibly don't even know. You know, if I was in that situation, I came here when I was 4. So if I get sent back to Guatemala, I have no idea what to do over there. You know, yeah, we might have family, but it's not the same. It's not the same as the life that you have here, you know, the jobs, your education, and things like that. So that's what's scary about all this, I think, knowing that at some point he can just say, hey, you're all going back to a country that you don't know, to a country that is, some people are leaving for, you know, either domestic violence or gang related, or it's just, some of these countries are very dangerous. And I just hope he does come up with something to help the people that are here, you know. And with that, I know earlier we were also talking about the stimulus checks, you know, and that's another thing that immigrants are not obligated to file tax returns because they don't have a social security number, right? So now, according to the law, any family that files taxes with the ITIN number, which is the individual taxpayer identification number with the IRS, and they don't have the social security number, and they're married to a US citizen, those US citizens are not getting a stimulus check. And they're also not getting the additional $500 that they would for each child that is a US citizen. But this was never said, you know, in the CARES Act. It was never mentioned. It was just, hey, everyone's getting their stimulus check. Now, all of a sudden, like 1.2 million people that are married to immigrants that don't have social securities are not getting a stimulus check. So what happens to them? You know, they're not collecting unemployment because they don't have the right to. So there's just too much going on, to be honest, with immigration. And it seems like it changes every day, and you just have to be like on the lookout for it. And a lot of it is left to interpretation. You know, and a lot of it too is discretionary work. A lot of it is, you know, like I speak to my husband about it, like I can file an application, right? And Amanda gets it, and Amanda feels compassion, and she's like, hey, you know, I'm going to approve it. And then the officer next to her says, well, I just don't feel like it today, and just doesn't approve it. And it's the same exact application, but it just depends on the person who receives it.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is something really important. that I think needs to get discussed is that some of this doesn't feel like qualified yet, like solidified yet in the process of how this works. We saw a lot of that type of subjectiveness getting talked about when we talked about border crossings last summer and the summer before. That it feels like there isn't a uniform procedure for this. Do you feel that like that way, that there's no like uniformity to it, or is there something being like dialed in? Like, do you see this process changing at all going forward?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think the only way it's going to change is if immigration is separated from the Department of Justice and from the president. Honestly, immigration is the only court that the president has a right to make all these changes, to file these executive orders, just because like bankruptcy courts, criminal courts, superior courts, they're all their own entity. They create their laws and their precedents. And immigration, there's the attorney general who just pulls out cases and he's like, I'm going to review this one and you can no longer use it for this in this case, or, just completely changes the whole law or the whole case law. So I think the only way that this is going to change is if they don't have a right to do that, and just let immigration be immigration and not ran by politics. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the way it has to be. It has to be separated, because as long as it's run by politics, I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
We mentioned talking about deportation and everything, and ICE. Do you think that the perception of what ICE is in the United States to people who don't have to deal with them on a daily basis, like yourself through your job, or your clients and other people that you or I may know, ICE has only been around since 2003, but it seems like the perception that your average American citizen has is that ICE has been around since the beginning of the United States, or however long they think it is. Do you think becoming more transparent about what ICE is and what ICE does, and understanding that ICE was not a response to protect the United States, but a response to use something like a terrible event like, September 11th to try and force immigration, do you think that might change the way people view it and maybe see more people want to help with immigration reform? Or would that just not matter if people actually knew the true, I guess, the history behind how ICE came to be?
At this point, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't really think it's going to make a difference. I think that ICE has made it kind of pretty clear, even in my field of work, when we work with them, speaking personally, some are pretty arrogant. Some officers, some are just, you try to speak to them to let your client out on a bond or to let them out. They have these bracelets where they put a bracelet on their ankle and they get tracked, and it's like a probationary kind of thing. You ask them to do something like that for a client who has a child, let's say, with special needs, and the person that they've just detained is the breadwinner, and they don't care, and sometimes it's unfortunate. I don't think it's going to change. I think it's just been, for me, ICE has been portrayed as kind of the bad guys. And I think it's going to be difficult to have a different perception of them, or change what we think of them or what everyone else thinks of them as well.
If you have just some closing thoughts here, if you have a message for any immigrants who are still in that bottleneck, in that pipeline, working through this, and who are feeling all these feelings of desperation as these tweets come through, and as things like the pandemic continue, from your position, both as your job and as an immigrant, what would you say? What would your message be?
I think the most important thing is you need to stay informed, as well as you have to be careful with, I guess, who you look for help. Make sure that it's an attorney, it's an accredited attorney, it's someone that's experienced in the field. I know sometimes with immigrants, we tend to because sometimes we don't have the money to look for an attorney. So we go to what's called a notario, which is just basically a public notary. And they try to portray themselves as attorneys. And, that's the biggest mistake. Just because it's half the price, or it's less than what an attorney is going to charge you, you go to them. The biggest thing is just find someone that's an attorney that's going to help you, that's going to push you through, and know that they're always there for you. I mean, currently our office is closed, but we're checking voicemails daily. I check emails every 5 seconds. It's opened. I respond as quickly as I can, just so that they know that they're okay, and just let's keep our heads up and hope for the better, and hope that this is going to change.
Thank you so much, Myra, for not just, joining us today, but of course for the work that you do. I know personally Newark is a lot of immigrants here in Newark and a lot of people that need help. And I think you do such a great job, you and your offices, making sure people can be safe and have the life that they can. So thanks for joining us, and stay safe. Stay safe throughout this pandemic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
So
it's also I feel like, real quick, it's worth pointing out that both of your Morning Buzz hosts today are first generation children of immigrants.
Yeah, my parents both came from Portugal, as just the rest of my family. I know you're
my dad.
Yeah, so it's
straight from Italy,
very much close to us, close to our general manager Annabella. She is from Argentina. So like, to be able to know that there are people there, some of us didn't have the hardships to face in that kind of situation, whether from us being born here or from being able to have a comparably easier process. Not to say the process of immigration is easy in the least bit, but I think to have someone like Myra and other attorneys and other people dedicating their lives to help people out like this, and to make sure people can stay in this country and live the life that they've built for themselves, it makes me hopeful and makes me feel like there are people out there that really want to do this.
Agreed.
But to really just kind of lighten the mood, let's talk about some meat. Some
you want to talk about meat?
So
it's so early in the day. Usually I don't talk about it this early. I wait till later.
So this is gonna probably a story to a warning story to not leave your meat out. And to
don't leave it. People don't want to see that, and it could get you in a lot of trouble.
So in Visalia, California, at around 4:30 a.m. on Tuesday, there was a burglary at the Jalisco Meat Market. When they arrived there, they detained an adult and a boy under the age of 18. They left the business and they followed a trail of meat to an apartment where they found 6 adults and 5 minors connected to the burglary. 13 people were arrested. They found some of the stolen meat being cooked during a small gathering. And a very important note about this robbery is that the home was filled with food. So this wasn't people stealing because of the fact that they were hungry. This was people stealing, I guess, just to steal meat.
Oh my goodness.
So, look, sometimes you got to get it. But the thing is, what my favorite part of this story, and then we got one more thing before we leave, but my favorite part of this story, unquestionably, is the line, officers followed a trail of meat to a nearby apartment. A physical trail. You were so bad at stealing that you left the product literally just like dots, like Pac-Man, just following it down and you you were a terrible thief.
That's some Wile E. Coyote stuff, right there.
It really is.
Did
Also,
you not notice the meat you were missing, walking?
Clearly these people
sausage links.
Right. Clearly these people never watched Scarface. Rule number 2: never get elevated off your own supply. So, and that's clearly what they were doing. They wanted to partake because of the meat, so they took it and they used it for themselves. Never use it for yourself. I feel like that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up the show real quick, because we are nearing the top of the hour. We have learned this past week that the Pride Parade in New York City is going to be canceled this year, obviously for safety reasons. It was the first time in its half-century history. Bill de Blasio confirmed that he canceled all permits for all large events in the month of June, which includes the Pride parades, in-person events leading up to Pride March, including its 50th anniversary, as well as the Celebrate Israel and Puerto Rico Day Parade. I'm going to say something that most people probably agree with. I don't think we're losing out much on Pride Parade being canceled.
No.
Pride's still happening.
Agreed. And also, I think, I mean, this might sound a little bit more confrontational than I intended to, but I'm still going to say it. Members of the LGBT community, myself included, never needed the law to tell them that they're valid. This is not new. Okay. We don't need a sanctioned organized gathering to know that we're valid. Or that we, deserve to exist or should have pride in who we are. So I think for public safety, it's a really good call to avoid this parade. I don't think we're losing anything specifically. I think it's justified. But
as fun as the parade can be, I think it really lost all credibility to me when the police were allowed to walk in the parade and had their own float, because
it's laughable.
Like Stonewall happened because of police treatment of gay and trans people at Stonewall Inn. Like, the police are the reason why Pride Day exists and the Pride Parade exists, and the fact that
and I don't get it twisted. I'm not trying to open up anything old when I say what I said, but I mean it. Like, we didn't need, you didn't say we could get married until 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We don't need a sanctioned event to tell us that we're valid, and that's okay. That's how we've always been,
I was gonna say too. I mean, you guys just have such a the whole population gets there's so much of a history. So many things have greatly happened in that community, and that's what you have to remember in Pride Month, just in general. So I feel like the idea that the month still exists and everybody knows it still exists, and we've made so many changes in our history because of Pride. I don't think it matters that there's not a single parade. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, we know it exists. You could celebrate from your home, from anywhere you could celebrate, and whatever that may be to celebrate, you could still do it anywhere.
Right.
It doesn't need to be in New York City on a parade where there's a million people. You know what I mean?
Right. And I also think it's important to make sure that we make it to the next year's Pride Parade.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Please make sure that, you stay home and abide by this stuff. It's very important.
Just build up all that excitement you want to do, and just we'll celebrate next. But
I'll tell you what, I'll do my estrogen shot on camera if that makes you feel better.
But we're wrapping up now, but we want to just mention how last night we had New Jersey Stars gathered up on New Jersey for Jersey Strong, raising funds for our state, for PPE, for food for people. And we're going to leave you at the top of the hour here at 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair with the boss and his wife.
He hit the top of the hour in that. He's so good. I trained you so well.
All from you. But we have here, of course, the boss and his wife, Patty Scalfa, as we say goodbye to our live streaming audience on YouTube. Thank you, of course, to our general manager, Annabella, Ryan Trick, of course, my co-host, Tara, and my newscaster, Amanda. And, of course, one of the biggest things to our wonderful engineer, Adam Goldberg. I mean, the man works day and night. Him and Annabella together are like a 1-2 punch for us to keep broadcasting. We couldn't really do this without them. So, when you go to bed at night, put a little picture of Adam under your pillow, say a little prayer.
I do. Leave an XLR cable under your pillow for him to take, and he'll leave you money.
he'll leave you a podcast file.
He'll leave you a podcast file unedited so you can edit it.
But we're going to leave you with this.
Thank you guys so much. You make this possible. Literally.
We'll see you tomorrow morning. And of course, we'll see you next week for the three of us again hosting and whatever jersey I end up wearing next week.
Stay safe, everybody.